My name is Janel Ganim, and I am SVP of Product and Operations at Resman. And my podcast co-host is hanging out over here.
Hi, everybody. I'm Rue, and I'm the industry principal for affordable housing for Resman. And we are so happy to see you all here.
Welcome to episode 10 of Cocktails and Compliance. We are super excited to be coming to you live from NAA. We are recording, so just, if you guys feel like applauding or laughing or something, or you have questions, let us know. We are so excited to have a wonderful panel with us. And I'm going to tell you, we have done Cocktails and Compliance with this group before, and they have a wealth of knowledge. So I have Anthony Sandoval, who is president and CEO of WSH Management. And next to Anthony, we have Jennifer Wood. Jennifer is vice president of John Stewart Company. And I'm glad you took a break in all your world travels to join us, Peter. We have Peter Lewis, who is executive vice president of property management for the Schochet Company. So thank you guys for being here.
Thank you for having us.
So, as always, for Cocktails and Compliance, we have a cocktail of the day. And because it was before noon, we thought it was appropriate to have mimosas. So, I hope you all have mimosas. And if you will just raise a glass. Jennifer's already like, yeah, I did. You can see she's working through hers. But cheers. Thank you guys for being here. I can't reach you all, but cheers. Cheers, Rue.
Cheers.
All right. So, those of you who live in the world of affordable housing know that there's a couple of things going on this year. We kind of joked that HUD got really busy. I don't know what happened, but between Inspire and HOTMA, there's a lot suddenly going on. Oh, hey. So the first thing that we wanted to talk about today is Inspire. Anybody participate in the Inspire demonstration program?
Yes. We entered 2 properties into Inspire demo program and just had our first inspection back on April 24th. And it actually, I thought, went rather well. Uploaded, I'll say, the 10 work orders with the pictures to their Salesforce software. And so open, closed, but no score, which was fine. So then yesterday, I get an email from HUD saying, guess what? Because you're in the demonstration program, we're coming to inspect you again with quality assurance. So when Brian was here yesterday, Brian Montgomery from HUD, I went up to him and I said, is this typical that a property's getting re-inspected again when they just went under Inspire? So he didn't think so. So he's taking that back to the HUD office and we'll see what happens.
Well, good luck, Peter.
Exactly.
My favorite part of Inspire is the really inspirational acronym, Inspire. So REAC, I do think, was really outdated and it didn't really reflect the condition of a property. And it had long been our complaint that, like, for REAC, there were a lot of deficiencies that didn't really mean much. Like a little tear in a refrigerator gasket didn't mean you had a missing or inoperable fridge. But that's the kind of, deficiency that you would get cited for. And so we're really excited about Inspire replacing REAC. We're just a little bit confused right now. We don't exactly know what it means or how we're going to be scored. And unfortunately, lenders, investors, our management clients all look at that information and use it to judge our management company.
Good morning, everyone. I think, when we talk Inspire, I think, different than Peter and my company, I threw it out there. Hey, do we want to participate in this demonstration because it was really pushed? And our attorneys came back to us and said, probably not. Refrain from that because when you're going to have to do it, you're going to have to do it. But I think that a lot of the confusion comes up around, we know it's effective January 1st, 2024. How's this going to impact us? And still, we're waiting for some guidance from HUD to find out what does it mean. I know a lot of us are looking at in regards to the self-inspection that we're going to be required to do and to grade ourselves on the self-inspection. Really? We'll grade ourselves gladly, but in accordance with what HUD sets up as a guideline. So I think there's a lot to, we're all going to learn this together. We're all going to learn it together quickly, but I know this industry, we're very resilient and we come back. I think all of us have the same goal. We want to do the right thing. And I think that's sort of HUD's thing too, that's something we want to do. But, I always say, what's the saying, put on your seatbelt, it's going to be a bumpy ride for a while.
Agreed.
It is going to be bumpy. And Anthony, you said that this is effective in January, but that's in the state of California, correct?
Actually, well, yeah, California, I know like October 1st, 2024 is what HUD said, but California Tax Credit Allocation Committee right now is saying we don't have guidance from HUD yet on how to do the Inspire inspection. So we're going to hold off till January 1st until, unless IRS comes back and says we have to do something different. Yes.
It's going to be interesting because the HUD world knows what to expect, right? We've been talking about it for a while, but it's tax credit. And so that's where I'm hearing there's a challenge is how are the tax credit properties going to handle this, especially if you're layered, right? Because like you said, the state agencies aren't quite sure how this is going to impact them.
Well, even beyond tax credit for conventional owners that have Section 8 voucher tenants in their properties, HUD's goal is to completely replace the UPCS scoring system that they use for HQS inspections and REAC. Their goal is to completely replace that with Inspire, so everyone would be subject to new inspection protocols.
And to add on that is like if you have a property, we talk conventional that has HUD guaranteed financing, you fall into that same realm too. So you're gonna be required to meet those Inspire inspections and goals and stuff like that. So it's not just like we talk about like just the Section 8 and HUD housing and the tax credit housing. It's also going to bleed into your conventional housing. If you have that HUD guaranteed financing, which a lot of market rate communities have because that financing was a little bit more affordable than some of the regular conventional financing.
Well, and a lot of Inspire is focused on health and safety issues, right? And there's a big focus on resident units. And I think you guys were talking about this when we had our prep call that, what if a resident changes the lock, right? You guys are going to get a finding.
Not only changes the lock, but puts a lock on another bedroom door and is subleasing that.
Well, that's a whole nother issue, Peter.
That opens up Pandora's box.
Yeah. Anything else about Inspire?
I think the big thing, most companies do this already, is it's really important for your staff to get in and do these. We do like in our company a semi-annual inspection where we're getting in there before HUD anyone else is going in there to find out what is going on with your units. I think there's nothing better than a surprise. You walk into someone's unit and you see stuff that and stuff usually they didn't tell you about. Usually what I hear about the residents like, why didn't you not report this issue to the office or management? What's going on? And they're always like, well, they're so busy. They're always so busy, and I didn't want to know. It's like, no, we need to know. Let us know. We'll get in there. We'll fix it. That's a key thing, and make sure there is other stuff going on because I think a lot of us, predominantly in my company, we run a lot of senior housing, a lot with the senior housing, and not that's just predicative of senior housing, but there's hoarding issues and that stuff that we have to address. And it's not like a quick thing to fix. You have to get in there and you want to know what's going on. Like I said, nobody wants those surprises.
I think one more thing about Inspire that's also about REAC and just sort of like government silliness at times is that, some of the deficiencies under REAC will not be deficiencies under Inspire, but HUD is trying to finish inspecting every property under the REAC protocol before, is it the end of October? So we just had an inspection where we spent a ridiculous sum of money preparing for this inspection for items that won't be findings under the Inspire protocol. So 2 examples. One example is overgrown vegetation. We have a property where residents have a private yard that they are supposed to maintain. And we spent a ton of money trying to, make sure that every blade of grass was not touching the building, that there were no weeds in the backyards of, that residents maintain. And then also fire sprinklers. So in the old protocol, if there was any tiny bit of paint on, like, say, an escutcheon, the sprinkler head, any of that, that was a big deficiency. It was a big point loss. And under the new protocol, it's nothing. But you all know it costs a whole lot of money to replace sprinkler heads. So that's what we're dealing with, which feels, again, a little silly. We're chasing points to try and pass an inspection that it won't even matter in just a few months.
So just closing out just make sure you do your pre-inspections on units. Really, that's where you want to focus on because that's where the weight is going to be. And so the sooner you're making sure that one, you're doing your annual inspections, as well as any other time that you have maintenance in the unit, you want to make sure that they're noting any deficiencies for follow-up, i.e., if the baseboard heater is missing that panel, you're in trouble. So again, just taking a different focus, but making sure you're looking at units.
Well, let's move to our next topic. Something we've talked about quite a bit in the past is staffing challenges. And with Anthony and Jennifer having properties in California, you have some very unique things happening there and some interesting legislation and things regarding employee leave. And Peter, being on the East Coast, you certainly have your challenges as well. But Anthony, you mentioned that the biggest legal issue right now facing employers is actually wage complaints.
In California, we have a couple of interesting things. We have something called PAGA, which is the Paid Attorney General Act, which an employee who has a complaint, he could actually file like as a class action on behalf of all employees. I was talking to some people yesterday about this. This is actually it's legal extortion, unfortunately, in the state of California. Jennifer shakes her head. And most companies have to deal with this. And they actually go back 4 years. They determine, the tough things, some of the things in California that if you are working over 6 hours, you have to have a 10-minute break in the morning, a 30-minute uninterrupted time off for lunch, and 10 minutes in the afternoon, which are not off the clock. Those 10-minute breaks are not off the clock. But as an employer, how do you prove that to someone's taking it? You can't. You don't have. So basically, you're guilty right off the bat. I know we had, unfortunately, had to deal with one a year ago, and got through it. I have to say we got through it okay, but it's just sort of a state mandated thing. And I always tell people, that aren't in California, be aware what happens in California because sort of it bleeds into everywhere else. So I think on that, it's just sort of always keep up with what's going on. I always say, what, even though you feel you treat your employees really, really well, I think it's always good to get the feedback and find out what is going on. We changed some policies in our corporate office in regards to when there is a termination of any employee, that the 4 owners, I'm one of them, is notified and knows the detail what's going on. Because unfortunately, being an owner, when you're sued, my name is on there. So.
Wow, thanks, Anthony. So I'm from San Francisco. I work in the San Francisco Bay Area. My company manages throughout the state. But I'm a regional VP, and I have about 12,000 units in my region, and I approve every termination for my region because, like Anthony said, there's just so much risk involved. And I want to second what he said on PAGA, too. It's a Private Attorney General Act, and it allows, like a former employee, and this has happened to us, to say, well, yeah, I clocked in every day at exactly 8:30 a.m. because that's what my boss told me to do. But I was there 15 minutes early every day. And for us, it resulted in just a tremendous loss a couple years ago. So we moved to a situation where we supply every employee with a company phone. They do live punches on that company phone. And if they aren't doing live punches, it's unfortunately, we have to take disciplinary action because we have to prove that it's a requirement for everyone to try and, make sure that those time records are accurate. We also have some challenges in San Francisco and actually throughout the whole state around leave. I know everyone suffered greatly during the pandemic, and there were a lot of folks out of, who weren't working. But we had, when our mayor announced that there was a shelter in place, we got a phone call telling us that we were essential workers and it didn't apply to us. We should be at work. So we were, because of course we manage housing for people who are really vulnerable, for formerly homeless, chronically mentally ill, seniors, etc. And at the same time, there was 80 hours of COVID leave required, paid COVID leave required on top of all of the other types of leave that exist. And that 80 hours didn't expire at the end of the year, and it was implemented every year of the pandemic. So 80, 80, 80. And we had a lot of employees taking that time off. If they were sick, of course, we wanted them to take the time off. But a lot of folks just saw it as extra time off. We also have the public health emergency leave, which was created in San Francisco during the monkeypox scare. And so if you thought you might have monkeypox, or you want to go get a monkeypox vaccine and you have a vaccination, impact, there's another 40 hours that you could take off. So just having people come to work, it was challenging because there's so much paid time off.
I think Peter is suddenly really happy he doesn't have properties in California.
Absolutely. You read my mind, happy not to be an operator in California. So we operate in Maine, Mass, Connecticut, Rhode Island. But our struggle is really in the staffing of whether it be property managers, admin, maintenance, trying to fill the vacant positions. I'm not sure where everybody went, but this is the worst I've seen it. I've been in this business for 37 years, and it is the struggle for staffing is real. And just having to find different ways, whether you're having to outsource with a vendor to get temporary maintenance in. I mean, I've got vendors, handling emergency on-call at properties and sleeping in a vacant unit to cover emergency on-call to be able to respond because I have no one else in the area. So the struggle, like I say, continues.
Shout out to everyone in the audience. For those that are hiring managers, show of hands, how many of you are having difficulties hiring people right now? Yeah, and I think it's sort of like, and I know NAA had actually quite a few sessions because I tried to attend them, how to get creative, in hiring people and bring them on board. And I think, one of the biggest thing is, the onboarding when you bring on a new employee, because it's so true. You have only one time to make a first impression. So, you can have everything great about your company, but bringing that person on and making them feel welcome and part of the team is really, really critical, especially as a hiring manager. Because I know a lot of times I see that in my own staff is that, you have a maintenance position that's been open for a while. You've been floating maintenance people around so we can get the work orders completed. You hire someone and you're like, oh gosh, I have 50 work orders I need to get done. Here's all these work orders, get working. Not a good thing to do. Sit back and sort of look back at, hey, how can I take the time to welcome this person aboard, walk them through this, see what's going on. And I think that's the key thing to keeping employees on long-term, because I know, I don't know, similar with Jennifer and Peter on this, that I had a lot of maintenance people that were aging in place. So they've been maintenance people for a long time, very seasoned, very experienced. During the pandemic, thought, you know what, I'm ready to retire. And that's why I think a lot of the workforce went, they retired early, by choice, and just said, maybe the decision was to do something else. But attracting the new generation to this market, to do some of the stuff is some of the creative ways. It's like, what can we do? I think one of the things that's always attracted people to the apartment industry market is we typically in California, we're required to have an employee unit. Rent is so expensive. So if you can offer employees an employee apartment, win-win.
Okay, I'm going to keep talking about staffing. So I think that some of this was foreseeable, and it is somewhat alarming to me that, in an industry, and I'm speaking specifically about affordable housing, where there are that I know of, specific degrees or educational paths, in high school, college, technical schools to do what we do. In that industry where it's rapidly expanding, right? Because we have this homelessness crisis and huge disparity in incomes across the nation. In metropolitan areas, there's a bigger and bigger wage gap. So it's foreseeable, right? Because our industry has to expand to meet the housing need. We're not meeting it yet. You can't just grow the number of experienced people overnight to have a bigger pool of applicants. So we really have to create our workforce, and we all have to work hard at recruiting not just experienced people, but people who are smart and capable and want to do this kind of work. And that's the big challenge that we all have right now. One of the things we did in the last 2 years, 3 years, in order to just manage the lack of personnel at some of our sites was create this new position called Property Operations Specialist. And basically it's a roving, kind of like a roving regional manager. They have a high skill set, that they can step in where there's not a manager, they can oversee a lease up, they can basically just plug in wherever we have an operational deficiency. And, it's been challenging to hire for that too, but at least we can have one person cover 3 or 4 properties if we absolutely have to.
So it's funny that you say that, because I put a job description out there for that property floating specialist. Probably, I'm going to say about 4 months ago, and I have got 0 resumes on it.
I think you need to change the name. People don't like to be called floater.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
Try
no floating.
roving instead.
Roving operations specialist.
Try that instead.
You know what? We'll noodle on that. We'll get you some possible job titles. So you guys hit on 2 things that I wanted to talk about too. So one, you talked about how do we get people into the industry, and how do we keep them there too? So we talk a lot about what does that next generation look like, because we talk about, we see each other at lots of conferences and we've seen the same people, and I'm not going to say how many years, but we're talking well into double digits. And you have people who are going to retire, and where's that heir apparent, and what does that next group of leaders look like? So I know, Anthony, we talked, you said you've been working on succession planning in your company for 3 years, but how do you attract those people? How do you keep them? And how do you identify your new leaders?
Our company embraced what we call EQI, or social emotional intelligence, over the last probably like for 10 years we've done this, where all candidates coming in, they go through, it's actually a aptitude program to sort of see where are their strengths, where are their weaknesses, where are areas, and you can, and I say weaknesses, but I mean areas that we can improve on, areas that we can target as give them education and to where they want to go. Because one of the biggest things is someone coming on board is they want to know, what are my opportunities within the organization? If I come in as an assistant manager and 20 years from now, I'm still going to be an assistant manager, or what are the opportunities? So we've tried to, create the career path. So when they do come in, they sort of see where the opportunities, and they know, go ahead and apply for these positions. We actually, in our recruiting process, we set aside 1 week prior to when our job requisition comes through, 1 week is open for employees to apply from within the organization before it goes out to the general public. So we let them know they get the first opportunity to apply for those positions, what are the requirements, and then beyond that, when someone does apply and say they're not qualified for whatever reason, we communicate to the employee what are the skills you're going to need to move up to that next level, so they don't just feel, well, I applied and I never got promoted. We let them know. The biggest thing in all this is communication. That's part of the what we call our emotional intelligence and sort of the communication process is sort of like, discuss this with your employees. Don't be open. Let them know sort of what you expect and what you need from them, and give them that opportunity.
A good retention strategy, I think, is to offer constant training and development opportunities. And none of us can do this work by ourselves. So we should always be training our replacements. And, one of the things our company does is we have a contract with a training company, and every employee has the opportunity to take certification courses and learn the affordable housing programs on their own, taking online courses. But I also really recommend bringing some of your emerging leaders, bringing them to conferences. A lot of companies don't allow, except for just their executives, to attend conferences. And this is a place where you can really see what your opportunities for advancement and growth are.
So just to add to that, especially for those in the audience, it's really important for you to, I'll say, make sure that you are taking advantage of all educational opportunities and making sure that you're learning each and every day. Wherever you can get that training and education from, you want it. You want to be the sponge. You want to absorb that knowledge. It's, like I say, it's critical for your success as well as the organization's. And so really, like I said, if your company will allow you to participate in that, go for it and take the time, because that's really where it pays off. And so for us, really, the succession planning, we've already started. My goal is to be retired in 10 years, but travel the world while I'm doing it before then, because you never know from day to day what happens. But yeah, I mean, we've already put in a director of operations behind me, so that basically I'm trying to make sure she knows everything that I work on and do. And so if you need, as they say, the password, the vault where everything is held, this is where all the information is stored. It's not rocket science, but share the information, pass the knowledge on, and that really will help your employees grow.
Peter, you needed a backup just because of all the travel that you're doing. Let's be honest.
Hey, can I share one more thing?
Yeah, of course.
So I just want to share another thing my company implemented in the last year, which I think is a great way to retain and develop your team. Is even though in the state of California it is not a requirement for a regional manager to have a real estate salesperson's license. It is a requirement if you are in a higher executive level position, because you can't sign contracts on behalf of the corporation if you don't have that license. So we are incentivizing our regional managers, and we offer to all of our regional managers the opportunity to get their real estate license through us. We pay for the courses, we do their registration, and once they get their license, we give them a bonus. And for every year they maintain their license, they get a bonus.
Just out of curiosity, how many hours to get that license? Any idea?
I think it was 90.
Oh, wow.
So a little bit of a shout out to NAA, because I know they have their top 20 in their 20s, which is actually really cool that you promote that, because that's where you want to start seeing those are our future leaders, and that's what's really important. I think for any company, we do sort of annually, we do like a 9-box analytical of all our employees to sort of figure out where they are, who are the ones who want to be developed, that want to go up to be that leader, and who are the ones that you're going to do coaching on, and you're going to work with those employees to improve upon what they're doing. And it's really key every year we pull in our managers and we go through this so we sort of know where we're at, because I think that's one of the biggest things, being a president and CEO of a company. What is my bench? And a lot of times you look out there and you're like, I don't have much of a bench. And that is something, you need to focus on, you need to be aware of.
So kind of in line with what we're talking about with staffing challenges and the next generation of leaders, the other thing that Jennifer hit on was centralizing some tasks, right? Whether it's maintenance or certain things. And certainly there's a theme here at NAA. I think I saw at least like 5 sessions on centralization. We've talked about it a lot in the conventional world, but now starting to look at, well, how does that apply to the affordable housing world as well? The first thing that pops to mind for me is certifications or voucher processing. But tell us a little bit about, Jennifer, I know your company has really embraced centralization.
Yeah, so we recognized with more rapid turnover during the last few years that it's really hard to hire. And again, the expanding industry and not a rapidly expanding pool of applicants who have experience, recognize that it's hard to hire someone who has the level of expertise for some of the things we need to accomplish. And it takes a lot of time to learn our industry. So one of the things that we did was we hired recruiters within our corporate office. It used to be the hiring manager's responsibility to, through our software system, to post a position, to cull through the candidates, do the interviews, make a selection. We now have 2 full-time recruiters in our corporate office who are doing all that pre-work for us. They're also doing job fairs. They're attending industry functions. It's made an amazing difference. It's reduced our vacant positions a lot. Another thing I'm currently lobbying for, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to have in my budget for next year, is a contract specialist. I'm looking for someone who can take off of our regional managers the renewal of all of our HAP contracts around the company. So we've got 88 or 9 HUD properties, but we also have a ton of properties with project-based voucher contracts. And making sure that we submit the rent increase packages on time is critical, because some housing authorities will not give you an increase if you don't submit it on the specific date, and then you've lost your rent increase for a whole year. Well, you can imagine that our owner clients really don't like that, and it might fall on us then to have to pay for that. So, just thinking about the fact that I've got, 50 or 60 regional managers around the state, because we manage about 36,000 units. It's a lot easier for us to have a couple of specialized people take on that role, at least at this point in history, where we do have shorter job stays and, more turnover and people who are still really developing.
I think similar to Jennifer, when everything started happening and realizing it's getting harder and harder to recruit people, we took recruiting in house. Same thing. We used to be at the property level, the supervisor managers level. We determined that it's not getting done. How can we help them out? How do we get the expertise in there to do this? Other thing I know we had also on our list in California, we have a transparency law in regards to positions that we have to be very clear. What is the job description? What is their role? What is the salary? That is consistent. I mean, California is very big on the non-discriminatory disparate impact, even though it was never your intent to discriminate against someone. It may appear that way because the position may be geared towards one person or another. So that is where we brought it in house. It's really the same thing, like Jennifer said. It's really helped to hire, especially with the talent that's coming in nowadays. Everything is online. The old days, I think people that are my age remember when you would go through the want ads. People would probably go, "What the heck is that?" But everything is online. Everything you need to recruit online. We actually do our initial interviews either through they are totally on through a browser or something like that we get to talk to the person and then go through what we set up for each one of these positions. We call it like a 3x2 matrix. It's on the must-haves and the nice-to-haves. So when you're going through and disseminating on the candidates that come through, because for every candidate that applies, you have to give them a fair and equal chance that this person is eligible for this position, and if they weren't, you better be prepared to say why they weren't. California is really big on that.
So we're doing kind of the same thing. We've had an internal recruiter, I'm going to say, in our organization for probably 10 years. And again, as Anthony said, our processing is all online. So basically all the new hire forms, once the resume is in, the interviews are done, all of that paperwork is done online and works very nicely, as long as you have the good applicant. But it's like I say, it's trying to use that information and streamline the process. And so again, having access to multiple calendars of people to schedule the interviews so you don't lose the applicant is also just as important to streamline, like they say, that part of the process as well.
One of the things we talked about is embracing technologies that's out there. And there are some amazing applicant tracking systems that you can do through your payroll system that are really cool. One of the ones that we use, because we use I'm not plugging them, but I'm telling you that it's ADP. They have an applicant tracking system where you can go in there and see every single open position, where you're at, how many candidates were applied for that position, where they stand in regards to how long the position's been open, and the traffic you're getting through, and when it came through, and what resources they're coming from. So it's actually really cool, and it actually, I would say, it's like, for me, I say, make it dummy proof for me. If I want to go in there and I think that there's someone that I meet that I think is qualified, there's just a little button says send out this job prospectus to a candidate. You have their email, you have contact information like that. You could click on it, sends it out to them, and then they can do everything and apply online. Because it's like keeping it simple, keeping it easy for the applicants to apply is a key thing, and quicker. The faster you respond, the better chance you have at hiring that person. Because what we see a lot of times, if you have a recruiter that's been sitting on a resume for a week, chances are when they go back to contact the person, they probably already got another job. So because there's so few people applying for so many positions, that when you find someone that is qualified, it's real key to pick them up right away and contact them.
And just a tidbit of advice for you out there in the audience, especially for the younger generation. If you're interviewing, please make sure you show up and follow through. I can't tell you the number of times that people will work with the recruiter, set up the appointment, and then either ghost for the interview or actually ghost for day one and never even show back up. And all of that information does get tracked and kept. And so really just don't burn a bridge is all I'm saying. It's important. And like I said, if something happens, you're no longer interested, communicate that back to the individual that you've been working with, but don't just ghost and go offline.
All right. So watching our clock, I want to make sure we hit a couple of other hot topics in the affordable industry. And I mentioned earlier that, HUD got really busy this year because they gave us Inspire, but they also gave us HOTMA, which is coming and effective January 1st. So you guys feeling good about HOTMA? You nervous? You ready?
Very nervous about HOTMA. Again, you got a deadline here of January 24. You know, being a software vendor, that things are not even tied down for what you need to do, never mind what needs to roll to your customers, and then for us to get trained on everything that needs to be done. And so, yeah, I'm very nervous of what is going to be supposed to have been done, but is not going to be ready in time.
So, for everyone in the room who has no idea what HOTMA is, it's the Housing Opportunity Through Modernization Act, and it
Which,
was,
by the way, totally sounds like affordable housing. Just in
yeah,
that name.
HOTMA, yeah.
So,
And it was passed in 2016. And to tell you the truth, I was actually pretty excited about it because there's some aspects of it, like raising the asset threshold from $5,000 to $50,000, that could be a lot easier for those of us who manage, especially tax credit properties, because in the code it says that they're going to base their income calculation on HUD's method, right? Though all the state agencies haven't figured out yet that this means something to them. So I think January is going to be really interesting. I hope that HUD or Congress gets smart about this. I hope that there's like some legislative solution that pushes it off a little bit, because I think the industry's not ready. All of our staff needs to be retrained on how to do certifications. There's a lot of changes. And this is true for every type of affordable housing program that has HUD involved: home, public housing, project-based Section 8, 202, 811 pracs, all those properties are impacted. But in theory, all the tax credit properties should be impacted too. And in theory, all the bond properties should be impacted too.
yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned Congress, because it will literally take an act of Congress to change it, because it is in the legislation that it has to be effective on January 1st of a year. Clearly, they didn't specify, because we've been talking about it, like you said, since 2016. So, Peter, you're right. From a technology perspective, we've been having working group calls with HUD for, I don't know, 3 months, something like that. We started talking about it way back, but it also tied in, and it's Rue and I's favorite topic is Tracks 203A. It also meant that that's going to happen at the same time too. So there are a lot of changes in there, like for RAD properties. I think over 50% of 203A impacts RAD contracts. So there is a lot coming from a software perspective. We certainly are coding based on the information we've been given. Still waiting on a few things to be finalized. But you're right, it's a training impact, certainly for the properties, because there are so many things outside of software that you guys have to be trained on. And I know there are some industry groups who have started training, and they're just trying to share as much information as they can. But it's coming fast and furious for sure.
My personal take on this is like, I think they need to change the acronym from HOTMA to Hot Mess.
I'm pretty sure some people are probably already calling it that behind the scenes. All right. So our other favorite topic lately, the Renter's Bill of Rights. Certainly, we've talked quite a bit about that. I know when it originally was being discussed, there was also a conversation about national rent control. And I know those of you being on both coasts and dealing with rent control don't think that's the solution to affordable housing, although that is certainly a misconception. So thoughts on the Renter's Bill of Rights or rent control?
So yeah, so rent control, that's definitely a hot topic in Massachusetts, especially with Mayor Wu trying to push that through. I don't know what's going to happen, but again, if we do anything and look back at history, we know that it doesn't work. Again, if you look at your insurance costs, look at your utility costs, look at all of those, expenses that really you have no, I'll call it hard control of, and yet you're going to be living on a flat rent and try and pro forma your property. I mean, it doesn't make sense. There are better ways to make again, to get the affordable housing. It is going to take Congress to step in and I think rectify this somehow. But it does scare me a little bit across the nation, the number of states that are trying to push rent control. Yet you can see very quickly, as soon as that is passed, whether in the state or the city, the number of cranes that stop operating. And even in Boston, there are a number of developers that basically put pencils down on developments and said, sorry, we're on pause within the Boston city limits, and said we're going everything outside of 128. And so production is staying outside, like I said, of Boston. But it is a real concern.
Yeah, I can't help but to comment on rent control because I do work in a lot of cities and counties where that is a thing, and it really does stifle production, and it discourages investment in that community for low and middle income housing. And what it does is it really is, I think it creates a greater gap, a disparity gap, because the solution is production. The solution is not rules and regulations. So if there was more housing, then naturally there will be more affordable housing, right? So the solution is production, and that's what we need folks to understand. Rent control is definitely not the answer.
Yeah, I can speak personally on that. I know Jennifer and I both belong to other groups. In California, we have an Affordable Housing Management Association that we have a legislative group, and I also work with the Northern California group that when California was putting through the rent control, we were able to carve out affordable housing. So we did not fall under that. Now, the state's now trying to come back and to change that, but so far we've been able to in the affordable housing, been able to rise above that. I think the big thing is your advocacy. There's a lot of advocacy on the renter side, not so much advocacy on the apartment side, which when NAA sends out these surveys and questionnaires and stuff like that, I know, we all get surveys and questionnaires. There's a lot going on, but take that time to fill that out. What is going on, so they can share that information with the legislature, because that is what they're hearing right now. They're hearing one side. They're not hearing the other side so much. And that has always been our proponent of it, is that it's a supply side issue. That, if you focus on that, it's going to take care of itself. I think any of us have been around for a long time. Does government do a good job at regulating business? Probably no. But where they get involved is where, strong advocacies, voters say, hey, we think that we're being treated unfairly, or things like that, where it's more of a communication. They don't understand what is happening, in the apartment management industry. I know, like on the All-Star, one of the things they talked about is the renters don't know everything that's included in their rent. When their rent goes up, they don't, I think it's really clear. They said, communicate with them, let them know that you spent $40,000 a year on landscaping, for your property, to keep that property looking clean. Your maintenance person, like if you owned your own home, can you just call someone and you expect them to be there, within an hour or two to fix your plumbing issue? No, you're having to take care of yourself. You're increasing your property tax. I think all of us also see that what's going on, as well as your insurance. I mean, insurance is going through the roof to insure these properties. Communicate that with your residents. Let them know, hey, this is where the cost is coming from. It's not, your increase doesn't not go to the bottom line. I mean, there's a lot of costs associated with that, and that's what's needed for this industry to stay strong and for us to, promote building more and getting, on our side, the more affordable housing out there.
Yeah, so it's interesting you mentioned rising costs, and I know we've talked about insurance quite a bit at, or the organizations that we're involved in, and some people can't even get insurance, right? They're being denied in some cases, and your hands are tied on how much you can charge for rent, right? Because that is regulated. So what are some ways that you can maximize your revenue, or have any kind of ancillary revenue? I know we've talked about vouchers, if your properties take vouchers.
Yeah, so for tax credit properties, I want to make sure you know that, well, you probably must accept, depending on where you are, Section 8 voucher holders. But if you accept a Section 8 voucher, you can get the full market rent for that voucher. So the Housing Authority's payment standard, or they may adjust it by market or amenity, or based on a market survey or rent reasonableness, but you can get the full standard even if that's above your tax credit maximum. And so that's extra rent that you can bring in on a tax credit property. There aren't a whole lot of other opportunities for ancillary income in affordable housing. I mean, there's those sort of old standbys like little bonus for your laundry contract, or maybe some revenue sharing for phone or cable. I mean, there's just not much, because anything that's required for the housing has to be deducted from the rent when you're determining whether you're under the limit for the program. So unlike in conventional housing, where you can charge an application fee and a notice fee, and I'm trying to think of some other examples. A pet rent. You just can't do that in affordable housing.
You're lucky if you're able to go back and get your court cost, but you're not going to get your attorney fees.
I think the big thing is tracking, and I know a lot of the new budgeting systems track this is by apartment, by employee, sort of, especially on the affordable. What is that maximum allowable rent you can charge, and what can you get? What are the opportunities there? So Jennifer mentioned, the voucher system is really, really critical to watch that, just to make sure. I know we're talking with Peter earlier, is communication with that housing authority to let them know what the payment standard is and sort of what their guidelines are. Because a lot of times they'll say, well, no, your tax credit rent is the market rent for that unit. It's like, no, it's not. Go back and read your regulations. It's not, if you are accepting a voucher. And I think that's, working with your housing authority and stuff like that to figure out where you can do that and maximize that, where you have coming in, because most of the time you will have, you're hearing from the housing authority that you have voucher holders that have nowhere to place their voucher because they can't find someone who, to move in. Well, in tax credit on our side, we have to accept them. So when they come in, that's one of the first things is if you have you go through your wait list, and once you've exhausted that wait list, you make sure that you've communicated with all the housing authorities and different things out there that you have this availability to fill that as soon as possible. Of course, that's your opportunity because you're going to get that gain to lease on that unit over a tax credit rent.
Okay, quick tip. If you have 100% tax credit property and you get a voucher holder, your staff that fills out the request for tenancy approval, there's a spot to put what you've rented your units at, the amount of rent. You put NA, NA, NA. The 100% of the property is assisted. All units are assisted. And then you should be able to get the payment standard.
But don't be afraid to engage the housing authority, because you will need to do that in order to get them to pay that standard. And unfortunately, if it's, I'll call it a lease renewal, it puts that family in a difficult situation when the true market rent is what it is, but the housing authority doesn't want to bring the rent up, but needs to.
Yeah, really quickly, I know we were going to touch on this too, because being in the affordable housing world, we're capped on our incomes, but there's no cap or specialty on your expenses. So we still have to compete with the market for the same people, the same rates of pay, because your payroll cost is the biggest part of your expenses, as well as your contracts. Good luck trying to go to a landscaper and say, we're affordable housing. Will you cut us a deal? It doesn't happen. They're still going to charge you for that. So that is always the challenge, because with the owner, you're trying to, they have bottom line. They have it's sort of like their mortgage and stuff they have to cover. So you as a management company are always struggling, like, how do we keep this in balance? How do we make this project work? And I think that is constantly looking at, where are the opportunities? There's the opportunity on the income side. Once you've exhausted that, then again, you look at the expense side. Where are some things where we can streamline?
I couldn't tell if Jennifer was like, I got one more, as we're watching our clock and it's red and all that fun stuff. So thank you all for being here. I so appreciate it. These guys are a wealth of information and I appreciate them joining us. Please reach out to us on LinkedIn. Our contact information is here as well. This will be posted out on PropTalk, which is where all of our podcasts are located. You can find that on Spotify or Apple or wherever you get your podcast. And I just appreciate you guys again for being here. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.